Hello, my name is Tom Cagliotti with Ortho Diagnostic Systems. Welcome to GMP Basics for Blood Establishments, an educational video program series developed and produced by Ortho Diagnostic Systems. This particular video program is devoted to an overview of quality assurance with an in-depth look at two key QA activities, auditing and error management. We will examine the process of auditing and look at error management as a system that treats errors as opportunities to improve our processes. To accompany this video, we have provided a training manual. Included in this manual are pre- and post-evaluations, highlights from the video, and a list of useful resources and references related to our topics. Let's review our objectives for this program. After completing this training program, you should be able to define quality assurance and the role of the QA unit in blood establishments, identify the important quality assurance functions, describe the characteristics of an effective internal auditing process, define the terms associated with error management, and describe the elements of a good error management system. Let's get started with a discussion of quality assurance, or QA, in blood establishments.
Hello, my name is Eva Quinley, also with Ortho Diagnostic Systems. Let's begin our discussion of quality assurance by looking at the Code of Federal Regulations, where the requirement for a quality assurance unit is indicated in the Good Manufacturing Practices for Pharmaceutical Products. 21 CFR 211.22a states, "There shall be a quality control unit that shall have the responsibility and authority to approve or reject all components, drug product containers, closures, in-process materials, packaging material, labeling, and drug products, and the authority to review production records to assure that no errors have occurred or, if errors have occurred, that they have been fully investigated." Note that the term quality assurance is not mentioned in the regulation. However, the functions described in the provision are clearly quality assurance functions, which the FDA has further defined in the Guideline for Quality Assurance in Blood Establishments, published in its final form in July of 1995. This document defines both the term quality assurance and the need for a quality assurance program, and lists in detail the activities which should be under the auspices of the QA unit. Let's take a look at the definition of quality assurance. Quality assurance is the actions planned and performed to provide confidence that all systems and elements that influence the quality of the product are working as expected. A quality assurance system is designed to accomplish this. Compliance with GMPs is just one aspect of quality assurance in blood establishments. The FDA considers the quality assurance function to be extremely important in blood establishments for several reasons. An effective QA program can result in a decrease in errors, credibility of test results, implementation of effective manufacturing processes and system controls, and products that consistently meet required safety and quality attributes. Let's look at how the QA unit fits into the organizational structure of a blood establishment. The QA unit in licensed establishments should report to the responsible head, and in unlicensed establishments to a designated qualified person. In both cases, these individuals shall have the authority to stop production activities, if necessary, to ensure the safety and effectiveness of products and services. The ideal reporting structure is one in which QA reports directly to top management, but totally separate from operations. Because this may not be possible in small blood establishments, such as a small transfusion service, the FDA has said that other structures may be deemed acceptable, provided that whoever is performing the QA function does not have final oversight over their own work. Now let's take a look at some of the functions which fall under the QA umbrella. In the area of SOPs, QA must have a very active role in determining where SOPs are needed, reviewing SOPs to ensure they meet regulatory requirements, and final approval of the SOP before it is implemented. While QA may not be directly involved in the writing of the SOP, input from quality assurance early in the development process can help produce an acceptable first draft. QA must also be involved in the validation efforts within a blood establishment. Developing validation protocols in cooperation with content experts and process users is a primary role. During the entire validation process, QA must be active in the review of all validation activities and results of all validation test protocols.
Good.
Designated QA personnel should serve as a liaison to inspecting agencies such as the FDA, ensuring that investigators are accompanied at all times during the inspection and that the facility is aware of the investigators' activities, including any photocopying, questioning of staff, or other requests that may arise during the inspection.
Let's run into our machines, any fractured red cells, any plasma, any
In the
tissue
area
samples,
of
things
training,
like that, or all-
quality assurance should aid in determining areas where training is needed. QA should also evaluate if training programs are effective and ensure that all training is appropriately documented. Two of the most important functions of the QA unit, auditing and error management, will be examined in the remainder of this program. Let's look first at the area of auditing.
The FDA considers the audit to be just one mechanism for evaluating the effectiveness of your total quality assurance system. The QA guidelines recommend that audits be structured using a systems approach that will examine the major systems utilized in blood manufacturing operations. So, what exactly is an audit? An audit can be described as a systematic and independent evaluation of the design, implementation, and effectiveness of procedures established to achieve and maintain specified standards of product quality. As you will see, one of the objectives of an audit program is to identify areas in need of improvement and to develop appropriate corrective actions that support continuous improvements to your systems. Let's take a look at two types of audits. First is a system audit. A total system can be made up of several processes. The scope of this audit examines all aspects of the system. The QA guideline describes the major systems for blood establishment operations: donor suitability, blood collections, testing, and so on. Each major system is comprised of critical control points and key elements that define the conditions necessary for successful performance of the system. A second type of audit is a focused audit. This type of audit may examine a single process or a specific area of a system to verify that inputs, processing, and outputs meet pre-established specifications. Focused audits are appropriate when you want to closely monitor one area of a system where quality problems have occurred. They are also useful for in-depth monitoring of a critical process or a new practice or procedure. Each one of these activities has associated with it specific procedures designed to ensure the quality and effectiveness of the finished product. An effective auditing program will tell you if those procedures are being followed and if they are accomplishing what you intended.
Ideally, responsibility for the audit process should be that of a dedicated group within the quality assurance unit. Sometimes a distinct compliance group reporting directly to QA is given this responsibility. Whatever the structure in your facility, there are some general requirements for a successful audit. The auditing function may be accomplished by internal or external auditors. Auditors should be knowledgeable in the processes and systems they are auditing. Auditors can work as an individual or as part of a team. Auditors should have education, training, and/or experience in conducting audits and the skills to collect, examine, assess, and report audit findings. Auditors should have knowledge of the standards and regulations that serve as the basis for the audit process. The FDA guideline states that ideally, an internal auditor should not be responsible for performing the procedures being audited. In small operations, the FDA may, however, approve appropriate alternative methods of accomplishing the audit. Most firms have an ongoing audit schedule for all areas of the facility. Depending upon the size and complexity of the operations, routine audits can be once or twice a year, with increased auditing as necessary. The bottom line is, audit as often as is necessary to demonstrate that your total QA system is working. With a history of comprehensive auditing, you can develop a level of confidence that your critical manufacturing processes are in control. Let's look at the details of how to conduct audits. As with anything else, successful auditing starts with adequate preparation. In preparing for audits, one should define the purpose of the audit. Is the audit intended to evaluate compliance with a standard, assess effectiveness of a new process, follow up on corrective actions? Define the scope of the audit. Is it a system or a focused audit? Define the specific operations that will be audited and identify the items, personnel, and activities to be examined. Be familiar with the activities you intend to audit and the procedures and standards governing those activities. Once the scope of the audit is established, you will have a general idea of the time required for the audit. Determine the resources needed to complete the audit. Should there be an audit team, or can one person complete the audit? Will outside contractors be needed? Will you require the assistance of people outside the audit team? Identify the people you will need available from within the audited department to participate in the audit process. Identify the authority for the audit. Is this a customer-supplier audit or an audit of service provider? In other words, what gives you the right to audit? Identify and be familiar with the performance standards against which the activities can be measured: the FDA, AABB, CLIA, DOT, and so on. Contact the auditee. Notify the person responsible for the area being audited, who is the auditee, of the purpose and scope of the planned audit. Define the date or dates of the audit and the activities to be examined. Make requests for any personnel, equipment, activity, records, and product necessary during the audit. Identify the audit team member or members and the preliminary audit schedule. Develop comprehensive checklists. Make them user-friendly, providing space to record audit findings adequate to support development of your audit report. Review the performance history of the auditee. Review previous internal audit reports, complaints, error reports, external inspection findings, FDA, HCFA, OSHA, and so on, to identify areas of potential problems or where recommended corrective action should be in place.
You are now ready for the data gathering portion of the audit. We'll consider this activity in 4 steps, starting with step number 1, the opening meeting.
And we would like to be at your facility at 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I want to see the production of leukoreduced red cells and platelets. I also want to be able to talk to the personnel who prepare
The opening meeting is held with the persons responsible for the area being audited, also known as the auditee. During this meeting, you will state the purpose of your audit and review your audit schedule. The auditor and auditee will also identify any areas of concern that may need additional focus during the audit. Finally, discuss any issues in the department that might impact the performance of the audit. As an auditor, you will need to understand not only what should be done, but what is being done in the process being audited. Steps number 2 and 3 will deal with this portion of your data gathering. Gaining an understanding of how a process is being performed can best be accomplished during an audit by observing and questioning the personnel performing the procedures.
The sample is then incubated at 37 degrees Celsius for an additional 1 hour.
Because being audited is a stressful process, it is important that you put the interviewee at ease. State your questions clearly and restate your understanding of the response. If any deficiencies are identified, be patient and allow the interviewee to clarify the information. Step number 3 deals with the verification of the information you have collected. This will be necessary before you can prepare a report of your findings and observations. Methods useful for verification of a system's performance include tracing of a blood product through all parts of the system being audited and assessing all documents, records, procedures, and practices associated with the product. Sampling of donor records, test results, error audits, and labeled components to assess compliance with specifications or identify persistent errors. Corroboration to verify your data with other independent evidence. Maybe a problem you've uncovered is present in departments outside the one you're auditing. The auditor should look for such connections.
Oh, hi, Brian. I just came out of the component lab and noticed that the filters weren't the correct height for leukoreduction.
The last of our 4 steps deals with the issue of communication. If you are part of a team audit, it is important that you communicate frequently with other members to share your findings and identify potential problem areas in the processes being audited. It is also recommended that you periodically inform the auditee of any areas of concern and the general progress of the audit. Maintain your focus on improvement of systems rather than personnel deficiencies.
Records for July and August and go back through them and look at record keeping and review. Then we can also take care of.
Brian and I are here this morning to discuss with you the findings of our audit. And this is...
When the data gathering phase of your audit is complete, it is important to hold an exit conference with the person responsible for the audited area. During this conference, you should summarize your findings, both good and bad. Give the auditee an opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings or misinterpretations you may have had. You should identify any immediate actions required and confirm any planned corrective actions. It is during the exit conference that you will leave the most lasting impression of your operating style and real objectives. This is a critical opportunity to focus on system problems, not people problems, whenever possible. At the same time, you must be honest in your evaluation and describe your findings fully. There should be no surprises when the auditee later reads your formal report.
And speaking of reports, your auditing work is not done yet. A formal written report is usually prepared within 2 weeks of completing the audit. The report should include an introduction section that gives background information on the area audited, including the dates and purpose of the audit, the individual responsible for the area, the highlights of previous audit results, and a summary of the products and processes found in the area. There should also be a summary of your audit findings, including a brief description of the most significant findings, both good and bad, and a description of any planned corrective actions. The body of the report should be a detailed list of your findings and observations. The term finding generally refers to substantiated facts that indicate a deviation from established standards. In other words, a problem. Observations denote vulnerabilities that, if ignored, could eventually lead to a problem in a system or process and the resulting products. Now that you've completed your report, it's a good idea to share it with someone. After all, what good is finding opportunities for improvement if no one shares in your discovery? The FDA requires that a copy of all audit reports go to the responsible head and other responsible individuals. Copies should also be sent to the QA manager, the person responsible for the area audited, and other responsible individuals as appropriate. Of course, a copy of the report must be retained in your audit program files. Once the audit report is issued, there should be a written response from the audited area if a response is necessary. Such a response will include a description of corrective actions to be taken with a schedule for their completion. The response is then evaluated by QA to determine if the proposed actions are appropriate. In cases where the corrective action does not seem appropriate, the auditor and a member of QA management should meet with the auditee to develop an acceptable plan. The QA unit will have the final authority and responsibility to ensure that appropriate corrective actions are implemented.
Okay, good.
Once corrective actions are established, the audit team should schedule a repeat audit to verify that the actions were implemented appropriately and that they are effective. The dates established for the follow-up audit should allow a reasonable amount of time for the corrective actions to be implemented adequately. It's also a good idea for the auditor to informally monitor the corrective action implementation prior to the repeat audit. The corrective action plan should be revised if necessary. As with most other systems, it is important that the activities of your audit program are fully documented. In fact, you should have an SOP that describes all aspects of how your audit program operates. who audits, how, when, where, and how the audit findings are documented. Let's examine one example of how your audit findings might be documented. It is imperative that the audit program have a documentation system that tracks the progress of each audit on a case-by-case basis. This will help ensure that follow-up actions are not overlooked. An appropriately designed automated system can be invaluable in this effort. Such a system would treat each audit as a separate case that would remain open until all follow-up actions are satisfactorily completed. The system would prompt the audit team on schedules for repeat audits or other follow-up actions required for open cases. The system would also prompt the user for routine audit schedules. The system would sort data by department to allow the auditor to check the audit history of any one area. Data could also be sorted by the type of deficiency observed, the process or product in which the deficiency occurred, the number of similar findings, and so on. The utilization of such a documentation system will facilitate trend analysis of your audit findings. It will also allow you to link your data with the database established for your error and accident reporting, which happens to be the last segment of our video program.
Mary Ann, we have a mislabeled unit of blood. We'll have to call the blood center.
Error management systems are required by many regulating agencies, including the American Association of Blood Banks, the Healthcare Finance Administration, known as HCFA, and the FDA. Each of these organizations recognizes the importance of a system to not only detect and manage errors, but to make changes where needed to prevent future errors from occurring. Before we get into the details of error management, it is a good idea to define some relevant terms. First, let's look at the word deviation. A deviation is defined as any variance from established standard operating procedures or specifications, regardless of whether or not the deviation affects product quality. This means that anything that is not performed according to our SOPs or manufacturer's instructions can be considered a deviation, even if what is done actually improves the product quality. Deviation is a general term. Two more specific terms are error and accident. An error can be defined as an unintentional deviation from a standard practice or procedure attributable to an individual's mistake. Errors usually involve a violation of GMPs. An accident is an unexpected occurrence during a process, manufacturing or service related, that is not attributable to an individual's mistake and is not the result of a GMP violation or SOP deviation. Failure to defer a donor who should have been deferred is an error. Someone dropping a sample tube is an accident. We also find the terms incident, variance, and occurrence used in some blood establishments. We will focus on the FDA-recognized terms of errors, accidents, and complaints. Complaints, which are defined as any verbal, written, or electronic statement of dissatisfaction, must also be considered in error management. While complaints are not always serious, they may provide valuable information to help prevent future problems.
You might be asking, what are the elements of a good error management system? Let's look at some of them as they apply to our example. The first step is detection. How can we manage our errors if we don't know when and where they are occurring? Errors are detected in a number of ways. They can be reported by customers or employees, or discovered during inspections, audits, complaint follow-up, or record review. In a quality environment, all employees must feel free to report errors and accidents without fear of punitive actions. Unfortunately, in the past, blood establishments have treated errors and accidents punitively, and so employees avoid reporting errors if at all possible. This must change in order for error management systems to work properly.
Hi, Glenn. This is Michelle at the hospital. Yeah, we have a mislabeled unit here.
It is important that once an error is detected, product quarantine and any other necessary steps are implemented to ensure that the affected product is not released, or if already distributed, is effectively recalled. This error was detected by the customer, making matters even worse because the error had a greater impact. In this case, the error is reportable by the blood center to the FDA. Once errors are detected, they must be fully documented. Effective documentation of errors and accidents requires a complete description of the circumstances so that anyone reading the report will have a clear understanding of exactly what happened. Most blood establishments have developed some sort of error and accident reporting form for this purpose. Several different titles have been applied to such forms. Error and accident report is the most common, but others include occurrence report, incident report, variance report, quality improvement report, and so on. Whatever the form is called, effective documentation should provide the who, what, when, where, and how, if possible, of the error or accident. Without complete documentation, error investigation and correction is difficult, and valuable time may be lost in going back to collect more information. Documentation forms used for errors and accidents should include space for a complete description of the following: the circumstances of the error, the investigative steps taken, any corrective actions taken or recommended, and any follow-up actions taken. There should also be a system to track errors and accidents. Usually, each occurrence is recorded in some sort of log. It is important to remember that such logs are subject to FDA inspection.
We have a possible problem here. This unit was retested by the hospital as Group A, and we've labeled it Group O. Would you retest this segment here?
Certainly. Once the event is documented thoroughly, an investigation can begin to determine the cause of the occurrence. In our example, we would certainly want to review documentation, retest, and question the staff. This will aid us in determining just where and how the error occurred, during collection, testing, or labeling. Whatever is done must be fully documented. Often, flowcharting the process and asking questions is helpful in determining the causes of a condition that led to the error being made.
They were right. This is Group A.
You know, this bag was missing 3 labels. I wonder if we had a sample labeling problem. I have.
By interviewing the staff during the investigation, we find that a donor's veins had collapsed during the draw for the unit in question, number 94, allowing the phlebotomist to collect the full unit but not to fill the pre-labeled sample tubes. The unused tubes for donor number 94 somehow remained in the rack and were mistakenly then filled with blood from donor number 95. In the laboratory, because there were no tubes for unit number 95, the technologist pulled samples from the attached segments and tested from those. While it was noted on the testing log that there were no tubes for unit number 95, no investigation was done as to why. When the QA person inspects the bag from donor number 95, there are 3 extra labels left on the label strip. As a result of these multiple errors, donor 95 was tested twice and donor 94 was not tested at all. Without this type of error investigation, it would have been very difficult to find the true cause of the problem and therefore impossible to develop effective preventative measures. In our example, the systems in place for the labeling of blood bags and for the testing of samples are at fault. There was no mechanism in place to check the original number of labels with the number of labels remaining and the number of labels used. In the laboratory, there was no procedure in place describing what to do if a unit was received without sample tubes.
An important function of error management is to determine appropriate corrective actions and to implement them in an effective manner. SOP revisions, training, and purchasing of new equipment are just some of the steps that may have to be taken to correct a problem. While the operations area will be charged with the implementation of corrective actions, the quality assurance unit must ensure that corrective action is implemented appropriately and is effective. An important point to recognize is that additional training is not always the answer. Oftentimes, training is needed only after other steps have been taken to correct problems. For example, if a specific manufacturing system is out of control and affecting your product quality, actions will have to be taken to restructure and improve the system before any training can take place. In our incorrect ABO label example, it is clear that corrective action is going to involve a number of steps, including review and possibly revision of SOPs in both the collection area and in the laboratory. Another important aspect of error management is that of